Welcome to Spooky History. In today's episode, we're off to the Mediterranean for a lovely summer's visit to the plague island of Poveglia. Venice. Venezia! The sun, the gorgeous buildings steeped in history, the canals, the romance, the honeymoons. Never been myself, but friends tell me it's absolutely beautiful. And if I ever save the money, sometime in the post-COVID future, I want to be walking the Venetian streets in full garb for one of their spectacular masquerades. We're talking bucket list material here, people. And the docks, the charming boat rides, the ferries and the sea. Oh, paradise. Yes, the sea. No doubt you can book yourself boat trips around its coastline, and there's no shortage of local sailors happy to take your money for it. You leave the harbour, the breeze is soft and gentle. You lie back, you enjoy the skyline of Venice. It gradually moves away from you, getting
smaller and smaller in the distance as you cross the Venetian lagoon.
You sit up, sip your champagne, get your iPhone cameras out and take some goofy selfies with picturesque backgrounds. A Venetian skyline, the bright blue sea, one or two green little islands, some passing fishing boats. You won't notice till you check your phones later the strange, unsettling looks these local fishermen gave you just now, glancing back over their shoulders, calling out to your boatsman. From what smatterings of their Italian you recognise, they're pointing and saying something about changing winds or whatever. You sit back and exhale. What a lovely day. Well, the boat's turning round. You were hoping to explore the islands around here. They look ideal spots for a picnic. A thought you happen to share with the boatman taking you back. What the hell? He tells you no? Snaps it more like. So you politely ask if there are any boat trips out to the island over there. What did I say? The look he just gave me. Oh yeah, in case you were wondering, he said no again. Followed up by, in his best, gravest English, it is illegal.
I never broke the law! I am the law!
Oh, okay, why? You ask, already forgetting that faint scream coming from the island you're leaving behind. Don't ask that question. Not if you ever want to enjoy the sea view from your hotel again. Not unless you want a completely true story that will pluck you from paradise and throw you into a vision of hell. Because that's what it was, and many believe still is. Alongside the bright dreams of Venice lies the darkest of nightmares. It's sobering proof that the horrors of reality, of unimaginable human suffering, can surpass any work of fiction. That Venice skyline you saw getting smaller as you sailed out was the last many ever saw of the city as they headed towards their doom, to that lush green island you pointed out earlier. According to Ghostwatch, it is not only regarded as one of the most haunted locations on the planet, but also one of the most evil places in the world. If you want its name, I suggest you look no further than the local saying, when an evil man dies, he wakes up in Poveglia. These local fishermen know what they're talking about, and take pains to avoid it. Just ask around. Would you want a sea breeze blowing the ashes of the dead into your eyes? Would you want to check your fishing nets only to be greeted with human bones? Coastal erosion, you understand. What's more, would you want to hear that faint scream again? Or the unbearable wailing getting louder, louder? The more I hear of this place, the more unnerved I become. To these citizens, Poveglia is an evil purgatory for lost souls. I'm warning you, stay away. No one has lived there since 1968, and there have been no new settlements of any kind since. Access is highly restricted. Unlike many famous spooky locations today, this is no haunted house story turned commercial ghost tour resort. And it really is illegal for tourists to visit without special permission. Not that that stopped the occasional photographer from bribing a local fisherman. Try it, if you must, you criminal. No one lives there now. Approaching by boat, half buried under trees and shrubs, the first thing you will see is a medieval bell tower that once belonged to the 12th century church of San Vitale. Napoleon Bonaparte had it demolished in 1806, leaving only the tower, which was then converted into a lighthouse. Its clock dates from 1745. There's a cabana, St. Vitali Church, old offices, possibly evidence of an old prison and a hospital, all lying in ruins, overgrown and abandoned. Walk there today, look down at your feet. What on earth is that? That's no ordinary woodland soil. It's thick, charred and sticky. And it's everywhere. That's because without any help from me, you found the plague pit, aka plague field. You're picnicking on a composted layer of burned human remains. Mwah! Buon appetito. Poveglia has seen its fair share of warfare. Its documented history dates back to 421 AD, when it was inhabited by refugees from Padua and Este during invasions. 800s became increasingly popularised, and during 1379, the Genoan fleet laid siege to Venice, forcing people to evacuate and leaving the island deserted until 1645, when Venetian authorities built 5 octagonal military fortifications to guard the lagoon, hence entrance to the city. Further invasions would already leave Poveglia no stranger to bloodbaths, yet things were only set to get worse. Under the Public Health Office, it served as a checkpoint for seafarers in 1776, but by 1793 this status evolved into something more sinister. Thanks to an outbreak of bubonic plague on 2 ships, the island became a lazaretto for the sick, or what you know as a quarantine zone. Poveglia became an island of death until the lazaretto was officially closed in 1814. The dead were shipped from the mainland and burned. The smoke and smell might have carried for miles. Meanwhile, swarms of plague victims were quarantined there in cramped conditions, knowing they'd never see their homes or families again, literally waiting to die. According to the National Geographic and Atlas Obscura, 100,000 to 160,000 people died there. Look again at this little island of 18 acres. Over 100,000 people. Think about that. A constant reek of human waste. The never-ending, sickly, sweet stench of burning human meat. The coughing, the choking, the dirt. Boils, oozing pus. No medicine, no sanitation, no hygiene or dignity. Men, women, children crying. Decomposing corpses, forgotten in the mayhem. And that's those lucky enough not to be buried alive. Or burned alive. No, I'm not exaggerating. Sorry. For as the sick kept arriving, bodies piled up at such a rate not even the bonfires could keep up. The authorities had to make room. An awful, miserable way to die. Sick, weak, unwanted, powerless. But the horrors of this island were far from over. Take another walk around that hospital ruins and you'll find an old sign written in Italian. Reparto Psychiatria. Psychiatric Department. In 1922, what was left of the buildings were converted into a mental asylum, then a nursing and care home, before its permanent closure in 1968. Bear in mind, back then you could also be committed simply for being homosexual or depressed as well. Millennials would be fucked. The patients swore they heard unbearable human wailing and screaming of disembodied souls, as if staff would believe them. An island isolated and surrounded by water, with no chance of escape, and completely at the mercy of whoever's in charge. That's bad enough. But this mental asylum contained a monster. That monster being a certain doctor. He had complete control over you. There was nothing you could do. Who would believe you if you told them you were being treated like an animal? Are you at all familiar with the procedure of a lobotomy? Are you aware what's involved? Your eye, wide open, gloved hands holding the lid back, the dull crack of your skull right next to your eyeball. And that's just when it was being done properly. Imagine if it wasn't. But some doctors were hungry for discovering the next great cure and immortalising their name. The lobotomy was a big, ambitious business in its day, and if they could do it to you, oh believe me, they would. Especially if you keep swearing you hear the ghostly cries of dead plague victims. Among the real-life horror stories of Poveglia, this butcher of a doctor experimented on patients at his leisure, performing lobotomies with rusty chisels and drills. No anaesthetic. Treating these patients like dolls to be twisted and broken. My eyes burn just thinking about it. However many people died naturally or otherwise in this mental hospital, we'll never know. Nor are there any official records of the evil doctor's name, though he has been named Dr. Paolo by some frightened locals. What we do know is the mass graves on this island aren't only filled with the plague victims. What a hellhole. And yet it gets darker. Wait till we hear about this. During the 1930s, the doctor committed suicide, or so they say, flung himself from the old bell tower, or was forced up there by something unspeakable. Why? Said he'd been driven mad. By what? Ghosts. In his battle to cure patients' minds of ghosts, it seems he only created more for himself. Seeing them, hearing voices, his mind was cracking at the seams. What's more, the fall did not kill him outright. A nurse who witnessed the incident said, as he lay on the ground writhing in pain, a mist came up out of the ground and choked him to death. Stories tell of the doctor's body being bricked up in the bell tower, and that even though years on the bell was removed, locals still insist it rang out on calm nights. During the 1960s, a family tried to purchase the island to construct a holiday home. They left forever after the very first night. Question them all you want. They never wanted to discuss it. Just forget the place for good. All we know is their daughter was rushed to hospital with her face torn up, needing over a dozen stitches. After that, apart from a short-lived attempt at farming, a failed bid from a hotel developer in 2014, a proposal for a public resort in 2015, and a forgotten architectural competition for building a university there in 2016, not a soul has occupied the island since. No one, resident nor project, seems to stay there long. Not even attempted restoration work on the bell tower, which according to Travel Channel's Haunted History report ceased without explanation. Paranormal researchers granted permission to visit recorded unnaturally high levels of paranormal activity and countless reports of an eerie apparition of a girl crying out for her parents along the water's edge. Poveglia is now reportedly one of the most haunted islands in the world. Blood-curdling sounds are heard by fishermen and mariners who steer clear of the shores, as it is for fear of winds blowing that ashen soil of the dead toward them. Smells of sulphur and burning wood. Tales of a ghostly child covered in buboes, called Little Maria. Apparitions of plague victims. The sounds of them coughing, crying, screaming, moaning. Spirits of the evil doctor and his butchered patients, with eyewitness accounts of being slapped, pushed, hit, touched, and choked by invisible hands. Underneath this fine, lush greenery is an island held together by the bones of people who died in agony. Who knows how many hold all these trees in the soil? Apparently many explorers, fortunate or unfortunate enough to gain access to Poveglia, have arrived with enthusiasm and left terrified, never to return, kissing the streets of Venice when they reach the mainland. They report hideous moaning, screaming of a forbidden, evil, unbearably oppressive atmosphere sinking right into their skin. A news team who stayed there overnight found that a chair in the old chapel had been moved, and not by any of their team. The pungency of the sight, buried and or burnt bodies or not, is overbearing and makes breathing difficult. There is something there, but what it is not clear. But whether you believe in the supernatural or not, I'd recommend exercising a little respect, because the news team found something else there too. Another sign, an older one. Ne fodias vita functi, contagio, requiescent, MDCC XC III. Do not dig. There are contagious bodies here. Requisant 1793. I hope you enjoyed that episode. You can find us on most social media at SpookyHistShow, and you can support us with donations at paypal.me/noisyghostent. If you have suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear them. Just leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and please, do have nightmares. Goodbye.